Hey guys, tonight we drift back to the midday bustle of ancient Rome, a city alive with the clatter of bronze cookware, the soft shuffle of sandaled feet across stone floors, and the aroma of olives, garum, and fresh-baked bread drifting from every domus. You probably won't survive this without imagining the sheer opulence of a Roman lunch platters piled with dormice, salted fish, and the occasional exotic fruit that had traveled farther than most of the city's citizens. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments so we can see how Roman midday life compares to your own. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through a peristyle courtyard, warm sun kissing your neck as the noise of street vendors reaches your ears. Dinner is still hours away, but lunch is the real event here. In patrician homes, the triclinium, the three-couch dining room awaits. Each couch draped with cushions, enough space for reclining on your left side, while a servant keeps your right hand free to pick morsels from the shared platter. You sink into the cushions and feel the day's heat pressing gently, your stomach rumbling in anticipation. Imagine the room buzzing with conversation, the clink of cups, the occasional cough or sneeze. A platter of olives and bread is pushed toward you first, simple, satisfying. Then comes the more extravagant fare, honey-glazed dormice sprinkled with poppy seeds, small fish preserved in brine, and sauces so pungent that even now, imagining the scent makes you wrinkle your nose. The Romans were masters of excess when it came to midday meals, but it wasn't purely indulgence, it was ritual. Overeating was practically expected. Historians still argue whether this was a conscious cultivation of pleasure or a demonstration of social status, showing that a host could afford to feed and then entertain guests while they dozed off in the middle of the day. You notice the subtle choreography of service, a slave presenting a goblet of wine, another holding a fan to keep the insects away, and yet another ready with a small napkin or sponge to dab your chin. The smells and textures are intoxicating. Fatty meats make your eyelids heavy. Dense bread and sweet fruits mingle in a kind of culinary lullaby. The Romans had names for this postprandial torpor. Some called it meridiana somnus, the midday sleep. Others joked about succumbing to the opus digestivium, the work your stomach does after feasting. You probably won't survive this, someone quips to a neighbor across the couch, lest you embrace the nap like a true Roman. Even the architecture of the home encourages the siesta. Sunlight streams through open windows, creating warm patches across mosaic floors. A gentle breeze carries the faint scent of herbs from the atrium garden. You feel a slow, undeniable pull toward rest. Some Romans believed that reclining while eating actually aided digestion, a notion that might make modern nutritionists roll their eyes, yet they had empirical evidence. Guests who lay down lightly on their sides seemed less prone to indigestion than those who sat upright. Fringe theories abound, though one suggests that reclining simply allowed the host to observe subtle reactions, social hierarchies, and guest etiquette, while everyone was half asleep. You think about that as you reach for a piece of honeyed bread and let your gaze drift lazily to a nearby fountain. Children run through the corridors outside, their laughter mingling with the low hum of conversation inside. You feel the gentle weight of satisfaction pressing on your chest, the first hints of drowsiness creeping in like a slow tide. Wine trickles warmly through your veins, further encouraging a desire to close your eyes for just a moment. It's a moment sanctioned by society, a pause that blends indulgence and necessity. The Romans knew something we often forget today. Heavy lunches are an invitation for rest, not merely a consequence of gluttony. You watch your neighbors as they handle the feast with practiced ease. The patrician next to you lifts a spoonful of sauce, dips bread, then sighs heavily. The sigh not of fatigue, but of contented surrender. One particularly extravagant senator who seems to have consumed an inordinate number of grapes and salted fish, leans against his cushions and lets his eyelids droop, the faintest smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Historians still argue whether these public displays of drowsiness were genuine or a form of competitive leisure, sort of like today's Instagram brunchers, but with more reclining and fewer hashtags. Outside the triclinium, the atrium garden hosts its own small dramas. Birds flutter in and out of decorative niches, pecking at crumbs or chirping overhead. The sound is oddly soothing, a natural white noise that makes your body respond instinctively, coaxing you toward relaxation. You think about how odd it is that something as simple as the chirping of a bird could orchestrate human behavior. Yet in the warm Roman sun, it all fits together: the food, the architecture, the sounds, the status signaling, and your slowly thickening sense of sleepiness. There's a hint of humor in the air, too. A servant trips slightly, spilling a small pool of wine, and everyone laughs softly. The joke is gentle, humanizing, reminding you that even in such a ritualized environment, moments of unpredictability and levity punctuate the day. The laughter is contagious, a subtle nudge toward ease, reinforcing the communal nature of rest. You feel a smirk tug at your face before your eyes begin to flutter closed. And as your consciousness dips toward that hazy, warm edge of sleep, you realize the genius of Roman design. Every element, from heavy meals to cushioned couches and the subtle background chatter, works together to make a nap not just possible, but inevitable. It's a dance between indulgence and necessity, pleasure and practicality, all set against the backdrop of a city alive with human ambition and sensory delight. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen your neighbor mentioned last week? Yeah, Rome's daily rituals were just as quirky. Here, reclining after lunch is not laziness. It's a carefully orchestrated cultural performance where digestion, comfort, and social grace intertwine, coaxing you toward that irresistible afternoon slumber. The warmth of your post-lunch drowsiness carries you seamlessly into an exploration of how Romans thought about digestion. You stretch slightly on the triclinium, feeling the slight give of cushions beneath you. And consider that ancient understanding of what happens after a meal was part science, part superstition, and part common sense passed down from generations of careful observers. You trudge through the concept of the humorous blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, which supposedly governed health, mood, and, conveniently, sleepiness after a feast. Overeating, especially of rich or oily foods, was believed to disrupt these humors, sending your body into an inevitable lull, a gentle reminder that balance was essential. Historians still argue whether Romans truly believed this, or if it was simply a convenient justification for lying on a couch in the middle of the day. Either way, you feel yourself nodding to the rhythm of this logic, your eyes heavy. The Romans didn't just accept post-meal drowsiness, they embraced it. Certain foods were thought to aid digestion, like lentils and barley, while others, like garum, that pungent fermented fish sauce, were known to challenge it. You reach for a fig, its sticky sweetness contrasting with the dense bread you've been nibbling, and marvel at how much attention they paid to combinations and timing. Fringe theories, recorded in marginalia and letters, suggest that some Romans even believed that specific spices or wines could manipulate the likelihood of falling asleep after lunch, a proto-scientific attempt to engineer a perfect siesta. Imagine the Roman equivalent of caffeine, but instead of jittery energy, it's all about encouraging a precise, luxurious dose. You feel the soft tug of tradition as you recline a little further, imagining the hand signals and gestures that subtly guided servants. Wine goblets are replenished just enough to maintain warmth without inducing reckless intoxication. Some argue that this balance between overindulgence and temperance contributed to general health, a kind of preventative medicine dressed up as leisure. The subtle art of digesting properly while entertaining is impressive, considering that your stomach is effectively doing double duty, processing heavy foods while you socialize, nod, and gesture. Scholars still debate whether this multitasking actually benefited longevity, or if it simply increased the likelihood of mild indigestion and chronic napping. And yet, you can't ignore the sensory strategies embedded in this ritual. Warm rooms, cushioned couches, and ambient sounds from the atrium, the gurgle of fountains, the soft rustle of drapery. The occasional call of a distant slave create an environment optimized for a gentle descent into slumber. The Romans even cultivated particular fragrances in oils and incense, claiming that lavender and rosemary could soothe the stomach and calm the mind. You imagine reclining amid these subtle smells, the honey on your tongue melting into a faintly herby aftertaste. A scholar once suggested that this olfactory design was intentionally therapeutic, a precursor to modern aromatherapy. Others argue it was simply the result of wealthy people enjoying scented luxury. Either way, it works. Your eyelids droop a little more with each passing moment. Curiously, the Romans also believed that posture mattered. Leaning back slightly, resting on the left side, allowed your stomach to digest naturally without pressure, they said. You shift gently, letting the triclinium cradle you. And marvel at how something so simple or well-designed couch could be an instrument of health. Fringe commentators of the time even suggested that a fully horizontal position was acceptable only for gods, whereas mortals achieve the optimal balance by reclining slightly, one arm free, the other draped lazily over a platter. You smirk at the thought of these debates and imagine someone meticulously measuring angles of repose in the dim afternoon sun. Your imagination floats to a quieter corner of a wealthy Roman home, where a small study or library provides solitude for the digesting elite. Scrolls and wax tablets lie ready, and a servant stands by with water and perhaps a light snack of grapes or almonds. There's a gentle logic here. Activity during digestion is minimal. Conversation is calm, and the room's acoustics amplify tranquility. Some Roman physicians advise reading aloud softly as a way to stimulate the mind without disturbing the digestive process. Historians still argue whether these routines were common or merely aspirational ideals among the educated elite. You wonder, as your own thoughts begin to blur into a drowsy haze, whether the average citizen had similar luxuries or if this was a patrician indulgence. Meanwhile, the connection between heat and sleepiness cannot be ignored. Rome's climate, Mediterranean and often scorching in summer, made the post-lunch period ideal for rest. People moved slowly, fans fluttered in delicate arcs, and even the architecture seemed to encourage repose. Atriums allowed for filtered sunlight, peristyles provided shady retreats, and the subtle hum of urban life created a natural white noise. You picture yourself wandering through these spaces, feeling the slow warmth seeping into your skin, aware that your body is naturally yielding to the cycle of digestion. Fringe accounts even suggest that certain foods, like chickpeas or lentil stews, were deliberately served to soften the stomach and induce a mild, pleasant drowsiness, a dietary lullaby, if you will. And then there's the social choreography. You notice how hosts monitor guests, subtly noting who falls asleep too quickly or struggles to remain upright. This is more than just comfort. 'Tis a display of control, a gentle power play wrapped in the guise of shared relaxation. Laughter, whispered conversations, and playful jabs balance the heavy foods, creating a rhythm that guides everyone toward synchronized dozing. You smile at the thought of a Roman wit quietly quipping about another guest's rumbling stomach or unsteady posture, blending humor and observation in a delicate dance of etiquette. Even the streets of Rome outside contribute to this atmosphere. Vendors close briefly or quiet their calls. Children wander in the shade, and distant fountains hum. Your senses adjust to this slower tempo, each detail, sound, temperature, texture nudging you closer to that post-lunch stupor. Historians still argue whether these rhythms were consciously cultivated or emerged organically from lifestyle, climate, and architectural design. Either way, it's undeniable. The Romans understood, at a surprisingly sophisticated level, the subtle interplay of body, environment, and habit that makes a nap both natural and culturally sanctioned. By now, you're not just imagining the science of digestion, you feel it. Your limbs relax, your mind drifts between awareness and dream, and the gentle hum of activity becomes a soothing backdrop to your mental rehearsal of Roman rituals. You picture the balance of flavors, the soft cushions, the filtered sunlight, and the subtle whispers of attendants, all conspiring to allow your body its deserved respite. Even the occasional playful or irreverent comments, someone teasing another for nodding off to nods to the charm, grounding you in human experience while gently guiding your consciousness toward rest. It's a testament to Roman ingenuity. They combined empirical observation, culinary expertise, social nuance, and environmental control to make post-lunch rest not only expected, but enjoyable. As you lean back slightly, adjusting your cushions to better support a lazy afternoon posture, you realize that modern humans might take a few cues here. The slow, intentional crafting of a space and experience to favor digestion and relaxation. You smile at the thought, the warmth of the midday sun still brushing your skin in memory, and let your mind drift, knowing that the dance between food, body, and environment is far older and more deliberate than most of us ever realize. You leave the triclinium behind door, at least. In your mind, drift into the balmy world of Rome's thermal baths, where post-lunch drowsiness finds a surprisingly luxurious stage. You trudge along mosaic corridors, the cool tiles brushing against your bare feet, while hearing the muffled splashes and distant laughter echoing through vaulted chambers. The baths weren't just for cleansing. They were centers of socialization, philosophical debate, and, crucially, napping. The warm waters, combined with steamy air and gentle humidity, worked like a sedative on the overstuffed stomach. You probably won't survive this mental excursion without imagining the subtle pleasure of sinking into tepid pools. Feeling the tension of digestion ease from your belly while your eyelids grow heavy. The Romans were precise about bath routines. First, the caldariama hot bath expanded your pores and relaxed muscles. Then, a plunge into the tepidarium, the warm room, allowed your body to adjust gradually. Some citizens even enjoyed an optional visit to the frigidarium, the cold bath, to reset the senses, though most post-lunch patrons avoided it. Jumping into icy water while digesting was frowned upon. Historians still argue whether these bathing sequences were primarily for hygiene, health, or social theater. You imagine the gentle lapping of water, the sound of sandals against wet stone, and a subtle steam that makes your eyelids sag almost automatically. Baths became miniature playgrounds for controlled lethargy. You notice fellow Romans reclining on marble benches, some with legs dangling in warm pools, others wrapped in linen towels, eyes half closed, whispering to neighbors. Servants circulate, offering small morsels of food or wine, ensuring digestion continues at a gentle pace. Fringe anecdotes report that some bath attendants would deliberately rock a reclining patron's chair or lightly splash water to prevent oversleeping, a quirky attempt at balancing relaxation with alertness. You smile at the idea of a bathroom as both spa and napping incubator, a concept that feels surprisingly modern. The architecture of these bathhouses amplifies relaxation. High ceilings and dome-like spaces allow sound to float and soften. Aqueduct-fed fountains provide a subtle, consistent white noise. The mixture of sunlight and shadow creates warm pockets that feel almost magnetic. You glide past the tepidarium's benches, feeling your own body resonate with the rhythm of others reclining nearby. Smells of scented oils and gentle smoke from incense blend with the earthy temps of warm stone and water, a sensory cocktail that encourages digestion and sleep simultaneously. There's a social component, too. You notice patricians and wealthy merchants engaging in quiet conversations about politics, philosophy, or the latest gossip, all while half asleep. Even gladiators or soldiers visiting the baths for recovery partake in the gentle lull of post-lunch warmth, their muscular frames melting into marble benches as they digest. You can almost hear one muttering about missing the latest chariot race while swaying gently against the stone. Historians still argue whether these public displays of drowsiness were encouraged or merely tolerated as a sign of refined leisure. Some baths had specialized napping areas, small alcoves with cushioned lounges where citizens could retreat for short rests. These spaces were subtly temperature-controlled, not too hot to induce faintness, not too cool to hinder relaxation. Fringe evidence hints at tiny servants stationed nearby with scented oils or fans to maintain the optimal nap-inducing environment. You imagine reclining here after a sumptuous lunch, feeling the weight of satisfaction press gently on your torso as the warm air hums around you. And then there's the role of water itself. Immersing partially or fully in tepid pools aids blood flow, softens muscles, and signals your nervous system that it's time to slow down. You watch a fellow bather lazily move their hand through water, ripples reflecting sunlight from an overhead window. It's mesmerizing and almost hypnotic. Some Romans claimed that repeated post-lunch dips could improve digestion efficiency and prevent the dreaded dyspepsia, the kind of stomach distress that makes one regret earlier indulgences. Others argued, more skeptically, that all this luxury was mere indulgence, a theatrical display of wealth. The psychological aspect is equally fascinating. Submerged in warm, comforting water, you feel your mind drifting toward half-conscious states. You recall that the Romans often combined baths with quiet literary pursuits, softly reading scrolls aloud, listening to poetic recitations, or debating philosophical ideas. The combination of mental engagement and physical ease created a delicate balance. Not quite asleep, but fully immersed in restful awareness. Fringe commentators even suggested that certain bath oils, infused with herbs like rosemary or mint, could sharpen the mind while simultaneously soothing digestion, a curious paradox that somehow fits into Roman practicality. Noise management plays a subtle role. The echoing chambers of the baths were designed to diffuse loud sounds and amplify gentle ones. Splashing, soft murmurs, and the hum of conversation coalesced into an ambient symphony that coaxed the body toward relaxation. Some citizens took naps directly on the marble floors of the tepidarium, using linen wraps as pillows, while others reclined partially in the pools, letting water support their weight. Historians still argue whether the baths were a health institution or a sophisticated leisure hub engineered for psychological comfort. You notice that even the timing of the baths reflects careful cultural choreography. Citizens avoided peak sunlight, often retreating to mid or late afternoon, so that digestion was underway and the sun's warmth contributed to drowsiness rather than discomfort. Some bathhouses even had small courtyards where citizens could nap in shaded tranquility between rooms. Fringe accounts describe nap bells, minor signals used to alert servants when a bather had lingered too long, blending practicality with humor. You smile at the idea of an entire society inventing gentle devices just to manage human sleepiness. As you let your attention wander over the warm surfaces, the soft trickle of water, the occasional giggle or whisper, you feel your own mental state mirror the physical environment. Your thoughts slow, heavy eyelids blink against drowsy awareness, and your breathing deepens. It's a reminder that the Roman siesta wasn't just about a meal lit, was a carefully orchestrated journey of body, environment, and mind. You sense that the next step is almost inevitable, surrendering fully to rest, knowing that when you wake, the world will resume its bustle. But for now, the gentle embrace of warmth and water is all that matters. You leave the baths imagining the streets outside, the clatter of merchants and the scent of baking bread, mingling with memories of reclining in warm water, absorbing the sun's afterglow. The Romans had engineered an afternoon ecosystem: architecture, thermal physics, culinary indulgence, social hierarchy, and subtle sensory manipulation all conspired to make the post-lunch nap a cultural inevitability. Even the quirkiest details, the scent of oils, the slight hum of water, the whispering attendants play a role, coaxing body and mind into perfect harmony. You drift through these thoughts, letting each one settle, as your own body begins to echo the slow rhythm of this long-ago city. You emerge from the soothing waters of the tepidarium, wrapped loosely in a linen towel, and step into the social undercurrent of Roman life, where naps were not just personal indulgences, but statements of subtle political theater. You trudge along the marble corridor toward a quieter atrium, the afternoon sun slanting through open arches, casting long, lazy shadows across mosaic floors. Here, the politics of siesta begins to unfold. Every yawn, every half-closed eyelid, every languid stretch is a message. The Romans understood that how you rested, where you rested, and how you signaled wakefulness or its absence was as critical as the feast itself. You probably won't survive this mental dive into social nuance without noticing the sly choreography of status and leisure. In patrician households, the triclinium and the baths are stages, but the atrium, lined with ornate statues and fragrant gardens, is the theater of observation. High-ranking Romans recline openly, while lower-status citizens or clients may be permitted only minimal repose, a subtle reinforcement of hierarchy. Servants and slaves circulate attentively, gauging when a master is ready to be roused or left to their post-lunch reverie. Fringe records suggest that some households employed subtle signals, tapping a foot, adjusting a wine cup, or tilting a small fan to communicate approval or mild reproach for someone dozing too deeply. You imagine a young senator learning this dance, trying to balance alertness with relaxation, conscious that even a yawn might be interpreted as arrogance or exhaustion. Historians still argue whether these displays were strictly performative or a reflection of genuine bodily need. Your eyes wander over a small gathering of fellow citizens, lounging amid fountains and cushions. Their conversation a mix of politics, philosophy, and whispered gossip. A wealthy matron leans lightly on her elbow, listening but not fully engaging, allowing the drowsy lull to carry her thoughts inward. You notice how subtle shifts in posture communicate mood, patience, or authority. Those who lean too far back might seem indulgent, while those who sit upright may signal diligence despite the encroaching lethargy. You marvel at the sophistication of this silent social language. Even in bustling streets, politics and rest intertwine. You imagine a magistrate returning from midday court or a forum session, pausing briefly in a shaded portico, letting digestion and reflection merge. The mere act of napping in public or semi-public had social implications. Fringe anecdotes report that some citizens used naps strategically. Appearing languid in the presence of superiors could evoke sympathy or perceived sophistication, while remaining alert might assert dominance. You can picture the subtle competitive napping that occurred quietly among peers, a game of body language and perception played under the guise of leisure. The foods you consumed earlier also feed into this political ballet. A heavy lunch of stuffed dormice or spiced meat signals wealth and access to rare ingredients, while lighter meals hint at restraint or modesty. Combined with the siesta, these choices become statements. A patrician might deliberately linger over figs and honeyed pastries, allowing digestion to slowly pull the body toward sleep, demonstrating a mastery over both appetite and time. Historians still argue whether this combination of dietary excess and strategic rest actually conferred status or simply reinforced pre-existing hierarchies. Architecture, once again, plays a crucial role in this performance. Shaded atriums, open peristyles, and interior gardens offer perfect nooks for semi-private repose, where one can be observed without fully exposing oneself. The placement of statues, fountains, and decorative columns is no accident. They create visual and acoustic barriers that allow selective engagement with the world. You imagine a subtle game of lines of sight, where the right angle allows you to appear attentive, while your body succumbs to the gentle tug of post-lunch torpor. Fringe commentators even suggest that some wealthy Romans had special nap wings, deliberately designed for unobtrusive rest. Your mind drifts to the interplay of conversation and lethargy. Guests murmur softly, exchanging ideas without demanding full cognitive energy. Their bodies half reclined, a faint echo of the bathhouse calm. Philosophers and rhetoricians may have debated while reclining, allowing digestion and semi-consciousness to mingle with intellectual engagement. A joke floats across your awareness, someone quipping about another's propensity for snoring. A gentle reminder that humor and humility temper the rigid structures of class and propriety. You chuckle lightly, feeling that warmth spread through your body as your own eyes droop against the sun's gentle press. Noise management remains subtle but crucial. The patter of small fountains, the occasional rustle of sandals, and muted conversations all serve to create a cocoon of comfort. Servants circulate unobtrusively, ready to supply water, adjust cushions, or offer a small hand gesture indicating that it's time to resume awareness. You imagine that each element, the sensory layering of sound, temperature, and touch is designed to reinforce not only comfort, but a shared cultural rhythm, orchestrating who rests, how deeply, and for how long. Even humor finds its place in this system. Patrons tease one another with gentle jabs about nodding off or playful exaggerations of digestive prowess. These small interactions lighten the social load, ensuring that even during rest, hierarchy and social bonds are maintained. You imagine a patrician guest leaning back just enough to be noticed, another quipping softly about his indulgence, and the subtle negotiation of attention and rest continuing across the room. Historians still argue whether these moments were scripted or spontaneous, but the choreography is unmistakable. The combination of environment, food, and social signaling produces a delicate balance. You feel yourself drawn into it, as if you, too, are reclining amid the atrium, absorbing the warmth, the gentle hum of conversation, the subtle rustle of cloth against marble. Even the smallest gestures, the tilt of a head, the careful placement of a cup carry meaning. The Roman afternoon becomes a slow dance between indulgence and display, body and society, sleep and vigilance. Fringe anecdotes claim that some guests mastered micronaps, closing their eyes just long enough to appear thoughtful, yet alert, when it required demonstrating a sophisticated control over physiology and performance that feels both absurdly meticulous and oddly relatable. And as your imagination continues to sink into the pattern, you realize that the political dimension of napping was as deliberate as any Senate debate. It wasn't simply about comfort or digestion. It was about presence, perception, and power. Even the way servants timed their attentions, the soft placement of cushions, or the choice of gentle scents reflects a careful orchestration of behavior. The nap becomes a vehicle for subtle control, for reinforcing social hierarchies, and for signaling cultural sophistication. By the time your attention begins to blur, you are fully immersed in the layered choreography of Roman leisure. You sense the intricate network of cues and rituals guiding every posture, every movement, every half-lidded glance. Even the quirkiest fringe story servants nudging sleepy nobles with feather fans, or using aromatic oils to prevent oversleeping fits seamlessly into this environment, blending practicality with indulgence and humor. You lean back in your mind's eye, letting the warm shadows of atriums and soft murmurs wash over you, feeling the slow, inevitable pull of a culture designed to make rest as much an art as a necessity. Stepping out from the sunlit atrium, you find yourself navigating the streets of Rome, where the challenge of quietude after lunch becomes immediately apparent. The city hums with life. Carts clatter across cobblestones, vendors shout their wares, and children dash past in games that seem simultaneously innocent and perilously loud. You trudge along, carrying the weight of a heavy meal and the soft tug of drowsiness, searching for that elusive pocket of calm. In this environment, the art of the Roman siesta extends beyond architecture and dining nits, a negotiation with sound itself. You probably won't survive this without appreciating how noise, deliberate or accidental, shaped the practice of post-lunch rest. Finding quiet was no simple feat. Wealthier citizens relied on semi-private peristyles and inner courtyards, while those with more modest means sought shaded nooks or even the relative tranquility of a quiet street corner. The constant urban din-clanging bronze, barking dogs, the shouting of street vendors posed a persistent challenge. Some Romans developed clever strategies. Water features acted as white noise. Fountains provided rhythmic splashes that masked harsher urban sounds. And birds were sometimes encouraged to perch near windows or in gardens to create a gentle, lulling background. Fringe anecdotes even describe citizens deliberately planting noisy birds, reasoning that the consistent chirping could pacify an overactive mind and nudge the body toward sleep. Historians still argue whether these acoustic techniques were widely practiced or confined to experimental households, but the ingenuity is clear. You walk along a narrow street, imagining the subtle rituals performed by citizens just a few meters away. Windows are partially shuttered to block sunlight and muffle noise. Curtains flutter softly to filter the air, and small alcoves and stone facades provide mini retreats for those seeking respite. You notice a shopkeeper leaning lazily against his stall, perhaps nursing a quick nap between customers, and wonder whether he is daring the world with audacity or simply following an accepted rhythm of urban life. These microspaces, often overlooked, play a crucial role in the broader culture of siesta, allowing rest to exist amidst chaos. The interplay of urban sound and private ritual is fascinating. Inside a typical Roman home, the arrangement of rooms, furniture, and even fountains shapes the experience of quiet. Marble surfaces amplify or dampen sound depending on placement. And some houses featured acoustic niches designed to absorb clamor while amplifying gentle, soothing noises like water trickling or soft conversation. Servants understood these nuances. A footstep here or a whispered word there could either disturb or maintain the delicate balance of calm. You imagine a careful choreography where every movement is deliberate, measured, and attentive to the sensory environment. Fringe stories suggest that some households even hired nap monitors to ensure that high-status guests were undisturbed. A notion that borders on absurd yet somehow fits perfectly into Roman excess. Even the types of background sounds had social and psychological significance. Birdsong was prized for its consistency and pleasantness, while fountains provided steady rhythm that could lull the mind without inducing drowsiness too early. Music was carefully selected. Too lively and it would disrupt digestion. Too somber and it might encourage prolonged inactivity. You notice how this balancing act mirrors modern considerations of workspace. Design or ambient sound in hospitals, a fascinating echo of Roman awareness centuries ahead of its time. Historians still argue whether Romans consciously thought of acoustics in this way, or if it emerged naturally through trial and error. But the result is undeniably sophisticated. You continue through the streets, imagining the variety of spaces Romans adapted for midday rest. Shaded porticos provide shelter from the sun. Quiet gardens offer fragrant air and privacy, and strategically placed fountains mask the urban din. Even narrow alleyways could serve as impromptu havens, where the combination of shadow, sound, and solitude allows the mind to drift. Some fringe sources report that citizens carried small personal cushions or linen wraps for impromptu repose, indicating that rest was portable, adaptive, and woven into the fabric of daily life. The idea that a city could be designed socially and physically to facilitate moments of semi-conscious pause is remarkable. The influence of social status is apparent here as well. Wealthier residents had access to larger homes with interior courtyards and private gardens. Poorer citizens relied on public spaces, negotiating privacy and quiet amidst the urban hum. You trudge past a group of merchants gathered under an awning, some half reclining on benches, sharing small morsels of bread, demonstrating that even modest citizens found ways to integrate rest into their day. Historians still argue whether public napping was widely accepted or socially frowned upon, especially for those of lower status. Your mind wanders to the delicate interplay between opportunity, social norms, and bodily need, a subtle, persistent tension embedded in Roman urban life. Noise management wasn't only about sound. It was also about timing. Romans recognized that the peak heat of midday encouraged natural drowsiness, and certain streets or spaces became more favorable for short rests. Citizens timed errands and social visits to coincide with this rhythm, creating a tacit understanding across the city that this period allowed for temporary withdrawal from full activity. Fringe anecdotes tell of shopkeepers dimming lights or draping cloth to signal that a brief siesta was underway, a subtle communal agreement that prioritized rest in the midst of daily hustle. You feel a thrill imagining the city as a giant, organic orchestration of pause and activity choreographed by sun, sound, and social convention. Even the personal experience of the streets is tactile. You feel the sun-warmed stone beneath your sandals, the occasional breeze brushing against your skin, and the distant scent of baking bread and cooking meats wafting through the air. These sensory inputs, often overlooked, subtly encourage digestion and drowsiness, blending with architecture and social norms to create a complex ecosystem of rest. You imagine a child playing near a fountain, their laughter softened by distance and water, a bird calling faintly, and a neighbor's linen drapery fluttering in the wind. Each detail layers into the urban soundscape, nudging the body toward that irresistible post-lunch lethargy. As you pause in a quiet corner, a shaded niche beside a small public fountain, you reflect on the broader ingenuity of this system. Romans didn't just rely on luxury or personal comfort. They adapted their urban environment, social behavior, and sensory inputs to support rest in a bustling city. Even minor details like the rhythmic drip of water, strategically placed greenery, or a servant's careful footsteps reinforce the culture of siesta. Fringe accounts suggest that some citizens even carried small personal objects, fans, scented oils, or cushions to optimize brief naps in public spaces, blurring the line between private and communal rest. Historians still argue whether such practices were widespread or exceptional, but the coherence of the system is clear. The city itself becomes a facilitator of gentle, structured lethargy. Finally, you notice the subtle humor threaded through urban napping. Citizens tease each other about quick dozes or overly dramatic stretching, maintaining social bonds even while the body succumbs to the gentle pull of digestion. These small interactions, like whispered comments about a neighbor's drooping eyelids or the strategic placement of a cushion, reinforce community while acknowledging individual needs. You lean against the warm stone, feeling a slow rhythm settling into your limbs and mind, appreciating that even in the middle of a bustling city, the Romans had carved out space for relaxation, sensory balance, and gentle social play. By the time you rise from the fountain's shadow, you understand that urban noise was never an obstacle. It was a canvas upon which Romans orchestrated pauses, naps, and micro-rests, weaving social norms, environmental cues, and personal indulgence into a seamless, afternoon-long tapestry. The streets themselves were participants in the siesta, offering pockets of tranquility, rhythmic background, and carefully curated sensory experiences to coax even the busiest citizen toward gentle repose. You trudge onward, feeling the subtle pull of tradition, society, and physiology guiding each step, fully immersed in the nuanced world of Roman midday rest. Your thoughts drift naturally from streets and baths into the realm of Roman literature, where the siesta is not only practiced but recorded, dissected, and occasionally lampooned. You trudge past an imagined library, shelves lined with scrolls of Virgil, Pliny, and Martial, the wax tablets of philosophers and statesmen scattered across wooden desks, each bearing subtle marks of midday use. The literary record offers a window into how Romans themselves perceived post-lunch sleep, often blending amusement with critique, practical observation with poetic flourish. You probably won't survive this mental stroll without imagining the authors as both witnesses and participants in the ritual of drowsy afternoons. Pliny the Younger, for instance, describes friends reclining lazily after sumptuous meals, commenting on digestion, conversation, and occasional lapses into unintentional slumber. He portrays these moments with both affection and irony, hinting that even the most diligent citizen is subject to the soft tyranny of postprandial torpor. Fringe anecdotes suggest that some scribes carried small nap markers, minor devices, or gestures to record the exact moment. A guest's eyelids began to droop, a playful nod to the precision Romans often applied to daily life. Historians still argue whether these literary portrayals reflect widespread practice or are exaggerated for comic effect. But you notice how vividly the scenes echo lived experience. A couch. The gentle tug of a full stomach, half-whispered commentary, the faintest snore escaping unnoticed. Even satirical poets engage with the siesta in their verse. Martial, for instance, juxtaposes the lethargy induced by heavy feasts with the bustle of daily city life, often highlighting the absurdity of a citizen nodding off mid-conversation. You imagine the subtle interplay of humor and social critique as a fellow reclines, goblet in hand, nodding and murmuring in semi-conscious agreement. It's a social ballet. Drowsiness is both natural and performative. A delicate negotiation between body and societal expectation. Fringe commentary even suggests that some writers intentionally exaggerated these moments to comment on social hierarchy, emphasizing that the wealthy could afford not only food but the luxury of timed rest. Roman comedies, too, captured the essence of post-lunch somnolence. Plautus and Terence create scenarios where servants must tiptoe around sleeping masters, misinterpreting sudden nods and twitches as intentional gestures of command or mood. You visualize a slave navigating a marble hall, careful not to disturb a dozing patrician who might twitch at the wrong moment and spark unintended comedy. Scholars still argue whether these portrayals reflect widespread cultural norms or merely theatrical exaggeration. But the narratives consistently show the tension between social etiquette and bodily need. You grin at the idea that ancient stage humor might mirror your own struggles to remain alert after a hearty meal. Letters and private correspondence offer another layer of insight. Pliny, Seneca, and other commentators occasionally note that a brief siesta after meals aided clarity, reflection, or preparation for evening activities. A lighter dinner, they imply, is easier to digest if preceded by a short rest. And intellectual work flows more smoothly when the body has had a moment to settle. Fringe sources suggest that some scribes even experimented with timing naps in alignment with digestion cycles, noting when creativity or memory seemed most enhanced. Historians still argue whether these observations are prescriptive, describing idealized practices, or descriptive, capturing genuine behavioral trends. Either way, they paint a vivid picture of a culture deeply attentive to the rhythm of body and mind. You imagine a scholar reclining on a triclinium with a wax tablet, nibbling olives and jotting brief notes about the ideal length of a post-lunch nap. Perhaps he pauses to comment on a guest's snore, smirking privately while keeping social decorum intact. This dual observation, scientific curiosity paired with human amusement, reflects a recurring theme in Roman writing: the integration of practical observation with social awareness. Fringe accounts describe some patrons carrying small tally devices, perhaps counting nods or measuring the impact of certain dishes on drowsiness, a proto-experiment in the mechanics of sleep. Roman epigrams and letters occasionally reference more colorful manifestations of post-lunch somnolence. Guests might drift into semi-conscious daydreams, muttering fragments of conversation or poetry. You picture a patrician reclining on cushions, half listening to a discussion about politics while simultaneously envisioning epic journeys or private humor. The mind teetering between engagement and surrender. Scholars still debate whether these literary depictions were widespread or reflective of elite households alone. But the consistency of imagery suggests that post-lunch lethargy was a recognizable cultural touchstone. Even practical manuals of the era reference mid-afternoon rest. Writers on health, diet, and domestic management advise incorporating a period of quiet after heavy meals, with varying degrees of specificity regarding duration, environment, and posture. Some recommend reclining slightly to aid digestion, while others suggest short walks or gentle social interactions to balance the heaviness of food. Fringe accounts propose extreme measures, slightly aromatic oils, or brief exposure to sunlight to modulate drowsiness, but the underlying principle is consistent. The body benefits from a structured pause, a window to allow digestion and mental recalibration. Historians still argue whether these instructions were widely followed or idealized, but the underlying wisdom resonates even in modern sleep research. You feel the subtle humor threaded through these texts. Authors often juxtapose the serious and the absurd, noting a patrician's impressive feast immediately followed by a gentle nod, or the unexpected snore during a philosophical debate. These moments humanize the cultural ritual, illustrating that even amidst careful planning and observation, nature intervenes with soft insistence. You visualize the gentle laughter, the shared understanding, the teasing commentary that turns drowsiness into social entertainment. Finally, you sense the continuity between these literary portrayals and lived experience. The texts are not merely records. They guide behavior, reflect societal values, and provide insight into the interplay of body, mind, and culture. You imagine yourself flipping through scrolls, reading snippets of observations and jokes, feeling the warmth of a Roman afternoon pressing lightly on your shoulders. Even the quirkiest fringe notes, the tallying of eyelid droops, or the use of aromatic oils fit seamlessly into the broader cultural understanding. Rest is not only necessary, but socially and personally significant. A ritual celebrated, critiqued, and refined through generations. By the time you set the scrolls aside, the rhythm of post-lunch life has embedded itself fully in your mind. The interplay of literature, observation, humor, and ritual paints a picture of a society attuned to the delicate balance between indulgence and recuperation. You trudge slowly, letting the gentle awareness of rest settle into your body, appreciating that Roman authors not only observed sleep, they codified it, celebrated it, and ensured that even in ink and parchment, the siesta remained a vivid, almost tangible part of daily life. The literary echoes of the Roman siesta naturally bring you back to the table, where the foods themselves dictate not only digestion, but the very trajectory of post-lunch lethargy. You trudge mentally through kitchens lined with amphorae and ceramic jars. The scents of roasting meats, pungent sauces, and fresh herbs weaving together like an aromatic symphony. You probably won't survive this without noticing how every dish, from the humble lentil stew to the exotic peacock and dormice delicacies, nudges the body toward that inevitable siesta. Romans knew, perhaps better than we often credit, that digestion and sleep are intimately connected, and the choice of foods after a long morning of activity was far from incidental. Heavy meats were central to the midday feast, often accompanied by rich, oily sauces that lingered pleasantly on the tongue and heavily on the stomach. You imagine slicing into a spiced cut of pork, the fat rendering slowly and mixing with the garum. That potent fermented fish sauce that could either delight or assault the senses, depending on one's tolerance. Scholars still argue whether garum was consumed primarily for taste, preservation, or a subtle, almost ritualistic contribution to post-lunch drowsiness. The combination of fat, salt, and sometimes wine acts like a slow-release sedative, pulling the body gradually into a state of gentle torpor. Fringe sources suggest that some Roman cooks deliberately layered textures and flavors to maximize the likelihood of a restful post-meal period. Culinary strategy that seems astonishingly modern. Sauces themselves were both functional and aesthetic. Thickened with flour or honey, infused with herbs like coriander, rue, or dill, these mixtures enhanced flavor while subtly influencing digestion. You nibble a fig mentally, imagining its sugar mingling with a slice of roast veal, creating a gentle, lingering heaviness that signals the body to prepare for rest. Romans didn't just eat for flavor. They engineered sensations that encouraged the mind to slow, the heart rate to soften, and the stomach to engage fully in its postprandial work. Historians still argue whether these culinary choices were intentional triggers for napping or simply the result of available ingredients and personal preference. Exotic fruits and legumes play an equally fascinating role. Chickpeas, lentils, and beans were not just staples. Some fringe accounts claim they were specifically recommended for promoting gentle lethargy after meals. You can almost picture a Roman nutritionist, scroll in hand, advising a senator. Yes. Consume the chickpeas, your guests will drift into a civilized doze, ideal for post-lunch contemplation. Modern readers might scoff, but the principle isn't entirely flawed. High-protein, high-fiber foods require more digestive effort, naturally encouraging a slowdown in physical activity. Even today, a chickpea-heavy meal can coax a subtle afternoon haze. Wine deserves its own meditation. Served in measured quantities, it enhances flavor, softens food textures, and encourages a mild state of relaxation. You imagine a small goblet of lightly spiced wine in your hand, the warm liquid complementing the fat and honeyed flavors of the feast, nudging your body toward the soft descent into sleep. Fringe observations suggest that some hosts even timed wine service to coincide with the expected onset of drowsiness, a subtle cue that it's time to recline and allow the digestive process to take over. Historians still argue whether this was calculated strategy or intuitive habit, but the synergy between wine, food, and body is undeniable. You trudge mentally to the more luxurious elements of the feast: peacocks, dormice, and other rare delicacies that symbolized both wealth and indulgence. The rich textures, often paired with dense sauces or sweet glazes, create not only a sensory delight, but a physiological nudge toward the siesta. Fringe accounts claim that dormice, fattened and seasoned, were prized specifically for their soporific potential, a strange but fitting reflection of Roman ingenuity. Even as you imagine the taste, the body responds automatically. Eyelids droop, shoulders relax, and the warmth of overindulgence presses lightly into your torso. Vegetables and fruits were also integral. Cucumbers, figs, and olives provided lightness amidst the heavier meats, balancing flavors while contributing to the digestive rhythm. Some herbalists suggested that rosemary or dill, often included in sauces or served fresh, could modulate alertness, either sharpening thought slightly or smoothing the transition to restful stupor. You notice how every choice, from dense grains to aromatic herbs, forms a deliberate choreography, a sensory cue that guides the body into post-lunch lethargy. Historians still argue whether these were empirical observations, folkloric beliefs, or the product of culinary superstition, but the consistency across texts and kitchens is striking. You trudge past the imagined service tables where slaves present platters with quiet precision. One tray holds honeyed figs and almonds, another spiced meat cuts, while small dishes of garum await those daring enough to indulge. Every placement, every combination subtly nudges the body toward rest. Fringe tales even suggest that some cooks deliberately staggered serving order to extend the digestive lull, maximizing both pleasure and the cultural expectation of siesta. You imagine a guest taking small bites, savoring flavors while muscles and mind slowly yield to drowsiness. The post-lunch nap is not purely about excess. It's also about timing and modulation. Heavy dishes initiate digestion and pull the body inward, while lighter accompaniments create texture and variety that prolong the sensory engagement, just enough to avoid immediate collapse into slumber. You imagine balancing olives and bread against a slice of roasted pork, wine in hand, feeling the gradual sway between alertness and gentle torpor. Fringe observations report that some families even kept small logs of which foods led to ideal post-lunch repose, a mix of empirical observation and playful curiosity that speaks to the Romans' dedication to structured leisure. Even humor emerges from the table. Guests might tease one another for nibbling too slowly, or remark wryly on who succumbs to the nap fastest. These moments provide social glue, reinforcing hierarchies while humanizing the ritual. You picture a patrician smirking at a neighbor's heavy sigh, another teasing about a rogue dormouse, and the collective laughter blending with the hum of digestion, creating a gentle, almost hypnotic rhythm. Historians still argue whether such jokes were polite ritual or genuine amusement, but they underscore the blending of body, mind, and society in the orchestration of post-lunch lethargy. Finally, the takeaway is clear. Food in Rome was more than nutrition. It was a deliberate tool in shaping daily rhythm, body, and mind. Each dish, each spice, each portion size was calibrated to guide digestion and encourage the culturally sanctioned siesta. You trudge back mentally to the mosaic floors, the cushioned couches, the fountains, and the warm sunlight, realizing that the meal is not merely a precursor to rest, it is a masterstroke in the architecture of human comfort. Even the quirkiest anecdotal claims chickpeas inducing sleep. Dormice as culinary soporifics fit into a coherent system. Romans understood the connection between body, food, and culture in a way that resonates centuries later. By the time you lean back against an imaginary triclinium, you feel the cumulative weight of flavors, textures, aromas, and social expectation pressing softly into your body. The heavy meats, sweet fruits, pungent sauces, and gentle wine all conspire with architecture, social choreography, and ambient sounds to create an irresistible pull toward rest. You imagine reclining there, eyelids fluttering, mind drifting, and the entire sensory world working in harmony to ensure that the post-lunch nap is not only possible, but inevitable. Celebration of pleasure, prudence, and cultural ingenuity. Your imagination now carries you from the dining table back into the broader rhythms of Roman domestic life, where the siesta is woven into both architecture and household management. You trudge through the familiar mosaic halls of a patrician home, sunlight filtering through lattice windows and casting gentle patterns on marble floors. The body, still digesting the heavy midday meal, leans naturally toward repose, while the environment itself seems designed to encourage the delicate drift between wakefulness and sleep. You probably won't survive this mental journey without noting how the interplay of space, light, and ritual orchestrates rest as subtly as a symphony. Architecture was more than aesthetic, it was functional. The arrangement of rooms and corridors dictated airflow, temperature, and light, crucial for post-lunch relaxation. Large windows and open peristyles admitted a slow, filtered sun, warming the skin just enough to coax drowsiness without causing discomfort. Alcoves and shaded corridors offered a retreat for those seeking privacy, while fountains and water features acted as ambient white noise. Fringe accounts suggest that some wealthy households even had specific nap wings, small rooms or alcoves optimized for rest, complete with cushions, rugs, and mild fragrances. Historians still argue whether these designs were standard or exceptional, but the intent is clear. Architecture itself supported a culture of deliberate, restorative inactivity. You imagine moving through a peristyle garden, the rustle of leaves blending with the gentle trickle of water, a chorus designed to lull both mind and body. The placement of benches, low walls, and planters creates pockets of solitude that allow citizens to retreat quietly from social obligation without signaling disengagement. Fringe sources claim that some gardens incorporated aromatic herbs, rosemary, lavender, and mint, believed to soothe digestion or subtly influence alertness. Scholars still debate the efficacy of these olfactory cues, but their presence reinforces the Roman preoccupation with harmonizing sensory experience, environment, and physiology. The arrangement of household staff further amplifies this effect. Slaves and attendants circulated quietly, refilling wine cups, adjusting cushions, or gently nudging guests awake when necessary. Even minor gestures, tilting a fan, rustling linen, or offering a tray of grapes, were orchestrated to maintain comfort, while respecting social hierarchy. You imagine a servant stepping lightly across marble floors, fully aware of which guests are permitted deeper repose and which require subtle encouragement to remain semi-conscious. Fringe anecdotes describe nap attendants whose sole duty was to monitor timing and posture during post-lunch rest, a mix of practicality and playful indulgence that speaks to Roman ingenuity. Lighting played a role as well. Windows were strategically positioned to avoid harsh glare, and lattice filtered sunlight into gentle patterns. The Romans understood the connection between brightness and wakefulness. Too much sun could disrupt digestion, too little could deepen lethargy excessively. You notice how these subtle manipulations mirror modern concepts of circadian rhythm management, suggesting that Roman domestic design integrated an intuitive understanding of human biology. Historians still argue whether this was deliberate or incidental, but the effect on post-lunch rest is undeniable. Even small details matter. The choice of cushions, rugs, and reclining furniture contributes to comfort while subtly influencing posture and circulation. Triclinia are angled to support partial recline, optimizing digestion while allowing social interaction. Fringe sources suggest that the firmness, height, and placement of cushions were intentionally varied to balance relaxation with alertness, a subtle way to guide both body and perception. You can imagine sinking into a well-prepared couch. Weight distributed evenly, limbs relaxing while still able to respond to conversation or the faintest social cue. Ambient sound is carefully curated. The trickle of fountains, distant street noise softened by walls, the occasional flutter of birds combine into a gentle background that masks sharper interruptions. You imagine the subtle choreography of sound and silence, where even minor disruptions are managed to maintain a tranquil environment. Fringe accounts describe households using bamboo clappers or soft drumming to signal the end of rest periods, a playful yet practical approach to timing in a society structured around meals and leisure. Household rituals reinforce these architectural and sensory strategies. Midday rest is often framed by brief readings, soft conversation, or gentle walks within the garden, creating a gradual descent into drowsiness. The sequenced light engagement followed by recline, followed by semi-private rest reflects an understanding of the body's natural rhythms, a tacit form of behavioral science. You notice the parallels to modern napping research. A brief, structured pause enhances digestion, cognitive function, and overall well-being. Historians still argue whether these patterns were observed rigorously or evolved organically. But the sophistication of the system is undeniable. Even the smallest gestures communicate social and personal awareness. A servant adjusts a drape to shield a guest from sun. Another offers a small sip of water or wine to ease digestion. These acts, trivial in isolation, collectively create a controlled environment optimized for rest. Fringe sources suggest that some households even tracked the timing of naps, noting which durations produce the most restorative effects. You imagine the subtle humor threaded through these practices, playful nudges, whispered commentary on dozing guests, and the delicate balancing act between observation and indulgence. Finally, you sense the cumulative effect of environment, ritual, and social choreography. The architecture, furniture, and ambient sounds are not mere backdrops. They actively participate in shaping the experience of post-lunch rest. The body is guided gently by warmth, light, scent, and subtle social cues into a state of semi-conscious relaxation. Even fringe practices, special nap wings, aromatic herbs, or meticulously arranged furniture fit seamlessly into this system, reflecting a culture attuned to the interplay between sensory input, digestion, and social propriety. You lean back in your mental image of a sunlit peristyle, feeling the slow pull of drowsiness, the gentle tug of tradition, and the comforting embrace of a society that celebrates rest as a necessary, integrated part of daily life. By the time you rise mentally from the garden, you understand that Roman homes were more than shelters. They were carefully calibrated environments that married architecture, social behavior, and sensory design to guide citizens gently through post-lunch digestion and rest. Every element, from sunlight to cushion placement, is part of a broader strategy to support the natural rhythm of the human body, blending pleasure, practicality, and social etiquette into a seamless, afternoon-long experience. Your mind drifts now from the controlled luxury of patrician homes to the vibrant, unpredictable world of Roman public spaces, where the siesta interacts with markets, streets, and communal life. You trudge along an imagined forum, sunlight striking marble columns, and feel the slow tug of digestion as you navigate the blend of commerce, conversation, and leisure. You probably won't survive this without imagining how the culture of post-lunch rest extends beyond private walls, threading itself into the very rhythms of city life, influencing everything from trade to civic participation. The forum, bustling in the morning, takes on a gentler character after the midday meal. Merchants pause from their stalls, arranging goods with deliberate slowness. Scribes close tablets briefly to allow digestion. Clients and patrons recline under shaded porticos, half listening to political debates while surrendering to drowsiness. Fringe anecdotes suggest that some stallholders even played soft instruments, creating a background hum to soothe potential shoppers into calmer moods, a subtle integration of sound design into commerce. Historians still argue whether these practices were standard or exceptional, but the impression is clear. Even the busiest urban centers recognize the cultural legitimacy of post-lunch rest. You trudge through alleyways where children play quietly in shaded corners, their games designed around the gentle rhythms of adult inactivity. Street vendors may lower awnings to provide respite from the sun, creating small pockets of cool shade where citizens can pause for a moment or even briefly recline. Fringe accounts suggest that some Roman streets incorporated small fountains or bird baths, not just for decoration, but to create a consistent, soothing background sound conducive to short naps or reflective pauses. The city itself seems designed or at least adapted to support intermittent rest, blending necessity with clever improvisation. Even civic institutions reflect awareness of post-lunch lethargy. Magistrates, senators, and other officials often scheduled brief recesses after feasts or ceremonial meals, allowing digestion and mental recalibration before resuming discussion or adjudication. Fringe evidence hints that some assemblies permitted reclining during such intervals, a gesture signaling both status and the body's need for restoration. Historians still argue whether these allowances were widely practiced or primarily observed in elite circles. But the idea that politics and physiology intersect in such subtle ways is striking. Markets and shops are not immune to these rhythms. Stallholders, aware that buyers' energy peaks in the morning and wanes in the afternoon, sometimes adjust their activity accordingly. You imagine a spice merchant leaning back slightly on a wooden bench, nodding to a neighboring vendor while savoring the warmth of digestion. Even the movement of goods, the deliberate pacing of lifting baskets, arranging amphorae, or cleaning surfaces, subtly slowed to align with the cultural expectation of post-lunch respite. Fringe anecdotes suggest that some merchants timed deliveries or small interactions to coincide with these natural lulls, blending efficiency with social compliance. Noise management in public spaces mirrors strategies used in private homes. Porticos, fountains, and shaded niches provide filtered sound, allowing citizens to retreat partially without fully disengaging from urban life. You notice how soft conversations ripple through the forum, punctuated by occasional laughter, the hum of animals, and distant footfalls, a soundscape that encourages semi-conscious reflection rather than full alertness. Fringe accounts even mention that some public fountains were intentionally designed with rhythmic water patterns, producing a hypnotic effect that subtly encouraged relaxation among passersby. Historians still debate whether these acoustic designs were deliberate or incidental, but their function in promoting calm is clear. Street-side dining is another intersection of digestion, social interaction, and minor repose. Popane, the Roman equivalent of casual eateries, allowed citizens to linger over wine, bread, and small dishes, creating a natural transition from activity to rest. Patrons leaned on benches, conversing quietly or simply watching the world move by, their bodies gently guided into semi-conscious relaxation by food, warmth, and ambient sound. Fringe evidence suggests that some populae even provided small cushions or mats for short rests, turning urban dining into a flexible, socially accepted window for recuperation. You notice that social signaling continues even in public. Citizens may nod off briefly. A gentle eye closure or subtle slump signaling temporary withdrawal while maintaining awareness of hierarchical relationships. Observers interpret these gestures carefully. A brief nap might suggest leisure and status, whereas prolonged or untimely drowsiness could invite criticism. Fringe accounts humorously suggest that some ambitious individuals feigned alertness while internally succumbing to sleep, a strategy that required nuanced bodily control and social awareness. Historians still argue about the extent to which such performance naps were practiced, but the concept illustrates the intersection of physiology and social navigation. Commerce, politics, and leisure converge in the afternoon, each subtly accommodating the siesta. Even religious activities show traces of this rhythm. Minor rituals or temple visits are timed to avoid peak drowsiness, while quieter periods of reflection allow both body and mind to align with cultural expectations of rest. You imagine a citizen pausing near a temple fountain, observing ritual practice while feeling the gentle pull of digestion, embodying the duality of public presence and private need. Fringe anecdotes describe minor devices, such as small fans or aromatic sprigs, used to nudge alertness if rest threatens to overtake attentiveness. Humor and human interaction punctuate these urban experiences. Friends tease one another about nodding in public. Playful commentary on posture and facial expression creates light social bonds. And minor exaggerations of drowsiness become a form of community theater. You imagine a merchant joking about a client's eyelid twitch, a neighbor exaggerating a polite snore, and the subtle negotiation between body, society, and humor continuing throughout the afternoon. Historians still argue whether these interactions were spontaneous or subtly ritualized, but they reinforce the notion that rest, while biological, is also profoundly social. Finally, you sense the cumulative effect of these urban rhythms. Streets, markets, porticos, and fountains are not merely backdrops. They are active participants in the orchestration of post-lunch rest. The interplay of architecture, social norms, sensory cues, and individual choice creates a living ecosystem of drowsiness and reflection. Fringe practices, such as aromatic herbs, rhythmic water, and portable cushions, blend seamlessly with the natural flow of city life, demonstrating a culture attuned to the needs of both body and society. As you trudge mentally through the sunlit forum, you feel the gentle pull of post-launch lethargy, the comforting cadence of routine, and the invisible choreography that allows a bustling city to embrace a momentary collective pause. By the time you pause beneath a shaded portico, the city's energy has shifted. The afternoon hum has softened into a gentle cadence. Citizens recline partially, merchants adjust their pace, and even the ambient sounds seem calibrated to support digestion, rest, and semi-conscious reflection. You realize that the Roman city itself is a carefully orchestrated stage, where the siesta is not just a private indulgence, but a shared cultural rhythm, deeply embedded in architecture, social norms, and daily practice. Your journey now carries you into the private and psychological dimensions of the Roman siesta, where body, mind, and cultural expectation converge into a delicate art. You trudge through imagined triclinium halls and quiet gardens, the warmth of the afternoon sun pressing gently against your shoulders, the aromas of lingering spices still clinging to the air. You probably won't survive this mental exploration without sensing how deeply Romans understood the interplay between digestion, alertness, and cognitive performance, crafting rituals that aligned the body's natural rhythms with social and personal expectations. The psychology of post-launch rest was remarkably nuanced. Romans recognized that digestion diverts blood flow, creating natural drowsiness. The heavy meats, rich sauces, and wine you experienced earlier compound this effect. But beyond physiology, There's the intentional shaping of perception. Reclining in a partially private yet observable space allows the body to rest while maintaining social awareness. Fringe sources claim that some elite citizens practiced micro-sleeping techniques, closing their eyes just enough to appear thoughtful while their mind drifted, a balancing act that combines self-control, social insight, and an almost preternatural awareness of bodily cues. Historians still argue whether these techniques were widespread or confined to a curious few. But the concept illustrates the sophistication of Roman understanding of human behavior. You trudge mentally through a typical household, where servants anticipate every need, adjusting cushions, offering a sip of wine or water, or subtly signaling that it's time to resume engagement. Even minor cues, stilted fans, rustling fabrics, or faint aromas guide the body into a relaxed yet socially acceptable posture. You imagine a senator reclining slightly, absorbing the warmth of sun and gentle air, while his mind drifts between reflection on state matters and fleeting daydreams. Fringe anecdotes describe some individuals timing mental exercises during this period, using the lull of digestion to plan speeches, rehearse poetry, or practice rhetorical gestures, integrating semi-conscious thought into the rhythm of rest. The cognitive dimension is fascinating. Romans observed that mental clarity often follows a brief period of repose. Post-lunch lethargy is not merely indulgence, it is preparation. Letters and treatises hint at the belief that a short siesta sharpens focus for afternoon debates, consultations, or philosophical discourse. You imagine leaning back on a well-placed cushion, feeling the subtle pull of digestion while allowing thoughts to drift freely. Then, rising refreshed and ready to engage with precision. Historians still debate whether this was a systematic practice or an idealized notion. But literary and anecdotal evidence consistently highlights a link between rest and mental acuity. Social perception remains a crucial consideration. A well-timed siesta conveys cultural sophistication and self-mastery, while poorly timed or excessive slumber could invite subtle censure. You notice the delicate choreography of micro-expressions, eyelid twitches, hand gestures, slight shifts in postural signaling, alertness, or acquiescence to drowsiness. Fringe accounts suggest that some Roman elites even conducted informal nap competitions, testing subtlety, composure, and control of bodily cues in social settings, humorous but telling reflection of the interplay between body, mind, and hierarchy. Even humor is strategically integrated into these private moments. Light teasing about drooping eyelids, mock concern over snoring, or playful commentary on reclining posture serves to reinforce bonds while acknowledging the inevitability of lethargy. You imagine an afternoon filled with gentle laughter, whispered jokes, and the quiet acknowledgement that the body requires pause, blending relaxation with social finesse. Historians still argue whether these interactions were formalized or spontaneous, but their recurrence in literature and anecdote underscores their cultural resonance. Fringe observations extend to the role of sensory modulation. Soft fragrances, warm sunlight, and rhythmic sounds create a multisensory environment that encourages controlled drowsiness. You trudge mentally through these spaces, imagining the subtle blend of citrus herbs or floral notes mingling with gentle water sounds and the warmth of marble underskin. A coordinated orchestration designed to relax muscles, slow breathing, and align the mind with the body's digestive state. Even minor elements, the temperature of air, the positioning of cushions, or the gentle flicker of sunlight participate in this carefully tuned ecosystem. The integration of dietary, environmental, and social cues creates a holistic system. Heavy foods, aromatic surroundings, soft surfaces, and quiet companionship converge to produce a state of semi-conscious awareness optimal for both digestion and mental recalibration. Fringe sources suggest that some households employed timing devices or subtle auditory cues to help guests regulate nap duration, blending precision with the soft indulgence of post-lunch rest. Historians still argue whether these were widespread innovations or the quirks of particularly inventive households. But the underlying principle is striking. Rest is orchestrated, not incidental. The psychological benefits extend beyond cognition. Gentle rest reduces stress, balances mood, and fosters social cohesion. You imagine reclining with awareness of both body and community, a soft harmony achieved between individual needs and societal expectations. Even the quirkiest practices, microsleeps, aromatic nudges, or rhythmic water features fit seamlessly into this framework, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of the interplay between physiology, perception, and cultural norms. Finally, you sense the culmination of all these factors: architecture, cuisine, ambient sound, social signaling, and sensory orchestration converging in a coherent ritual that guides the Roman body and mind through the afternoon. You trudge mentally back through sunlit atriums, mosaic halls, fountains, and peristyles, feeling the gentle pull of lethargy, the warmth of tradition, and the soft satisfaction of a society attuned to natural rhythms. In these moments, the siesta becomes more than a nap. It's a deliberate, socially meaningful, and physiologically tuned art form, carefully woven into every aspect of life, from the mundane to the ceremonial. By the time you rise, refreshed and subtly alert, you understand that Romans did not simply indulge in post-launch sleep, they crafted an entire culture around it, blending necessity, social grace, humor, and subtle environmental engineering. Even the quirkiest fringe practices, the most precise gestures, and the most delicate sensory calibrations all contribute to a singular conclusion. Rest, in Rome, is as much about society, perception, and artistry as it is about biology. Now let your mind soften and your body settle into a gentle rhythm, as though you are reclining on a warm Roman triclinium, the sunlight filtered through latticed windows, the faint trickle of water in the peristyle blending with distant birdsong. Your limbs feel pleasantly heavy, the gentle tug of digestion guiding you toward stillness without urgency. Inhale slowly, noticing the subtle warmth of the air on your skin, the lingering aroma of honey, herbs, and roasted meats mingling faintly with marble and linen. Each breath encourages calm, and each exhale releases the tension that is gathered from your day. You may picture the soft murmur of conversation fading to background, the occasional chuckle of a neighbor or servant, serving only to remind you that life continues gently around you. There is no rush here. The world moves with the unhurried grace of a city that understands the wisdom of rest. Let your thoughts drift like shadows on mosaic floors, noticing them without gripping them, allowing them to soften, dissolve, or float away entirely. Feel the gentle cadence of relaxation pulse through your body, from the warmth in your chest to the softness in your feet, as though every element of Roman domestic and social life, the cushions, the fountains, the rhythmic footfalls, has conspired to cradle you in comfort. You are suspended in this liminal space between activity and sleep, aware yet untethered, held by the careful orchestration of body, mind, and culture. Even the quirkiest elements, the gentle sway of a bird in a garden, the faint aroma of fig and wine, the whisper of draped linen, join in a soft symphony that encourages ease, reflection, and gentle release. Allow your thoughts, your awareness, and your body to float together slowly, peacefully, and with the kind of gentle curiosity the Romans themselves might have cherished during their midday repose. Now drift further into this calm, carrying the subtle satisfaction of rest, the warmth of tradition, and the soft knowledge that you are part of a timeless rhythm of pause and renewal.